I wanted to talk a bit about what I call the transhumanist agenda, because somebody left a very interesting comment on one of my videos. They've been, I think they might live close to Stockholm, but they've encountered Martinist groups there, and some of these Martinist or other occult groups appear to be endorsing, or at least speaking of in a positive way, transhumanism, which really, to anybody engaged in spiritual work on the light side, divine magic rather than sorcery, sees and understands that the transhumanist agenda is a manifestation of antichrist and incredibly dangerous and malefic, and the merging of the human mind with the machine is an incredible spiritual danger. Nelson might say it's very ironic for me to be speaking of it in these terms, and at the same time using a phone to record my voice, uploading videos to YouTube, using social media in any way. And I definitely do have some, it's hard to deny that you'd be right to point that out, that, you know, being plugged into the internet at all is to some extent to go along with this agenda to merge the human mind with machines, not just physically by chipping them, as is happening. And it's started to happen. Well, Elon Musk put in, I don't know how he's doing it, but he's doing something physical to people's brains to merge them with machines. But I think also on a psychic level, I mean, we've all, anybody who uses the internet to any great extent will have been in a situation where it feels like sometimes you only have to think about a certain thing. Buying a sofa, you only have to think, I want a new sofa, and it seems like you have an advert instantly appearing sometimes before it's even hard to tell, did you see that first, or you know, did it appear before or after? And those boundaries are becoming ever more blurred. You know, we're becoming almost extensions of our computer. Somebody like me that relies on a computer to type a lot for work for hours and hours a day, you know, keyboard does become like an extension of your mind, which is one thing, because typing is mechanical. It's a bit like using an instrument. However, the trouble is that technology is able to kind of monitor keystrokes now, and the AI has become so sophisticated that you would almost say it's a mind reader. Although I have my own thoughts on, for example, ChatGPT, something I absolutely refuse to use. I don't think it delivers really great results in either writing or in its ability to philosophize, which I think is incredibly limited. Although I do think that the art that AI can generate is quite interesting at times. It's scary if it gets into faking photography for malefic purposes, but nevertheless, you can get some really interesting artistic results. So you might say that is a positive. You might also say there are some positives if you, in the realm of medicine, if you perhaps get people who are unable to walk, or they're unable to perform certain motor functions, and technology enables them to live better lives, then I think that's something, if we were in that position ourselves, we'd, you know, probably welcome it, I think. So it's not solid black or white, but I think that the basic idea of merging a human being, a human mind, a human soul, God forbid, with machine is anti-Christ in principle, and puts me in mind of some of the writings we hear from Valentin Tomberg and also Rudolf Steiner. Tomberg, in Meditations on the Tarot, writes quite some length about the electrical dry electrical forces of Antichrist power, and it seems to have really seen this coming way ahead. And now, of course, it's worth bearing in mind that Thunberg, of course, was having to monitor radio messages coming from Moscow, the stream of constant lies coming out of communist Russia. The Bolsheviks had murdered his parents, so this was very difficult for Thunberg to bear. So I can see why the idea of being tapped into an electrical telecommunications system would be a very negative experience for Thunberg. It would be for anybody. I mean, too much Wi-Fi messes with your brain, and he didn't have Wi-Fi, but that's how we feel it now. And I think any kind of telecoms, we can feel it kind of, you get the brain fry from it. So, okay, but I think it was actually deeper than that. The idea that malefic forces working through the power of electricity in some way. Going further back to Rudolf Steiner, I don't know his work quite as well, but he wrote about the eighth sphere, a soul trap, but also about the great spider web that he saw would one day engulf the whole planet. And the spider web, the way he describes it, it's too much like the World Wide Web, the internet, too similar to be discounted. And Steiner could be incredibly prophetic at times. I don't know his work inside out by any means. Wouldn't describe myself as an anthroposophist, but there's some things that he just seemed to get so right and just hit the nail on the head. And I think that's one of them. I do think he could see certain things coming. So yeah, the transhumanism agenda, as I call it, leaves me cold. It makes my blood run cold. I fear for humanity when I hear about how artificial intelligence is being developed, where they have these robots called Sophia that you're supposed to pray to, monks in Japan, fake robot monks, again, that are supposed to dispense spiritual wisdom. Just the whole concept of the thing is just incredibly the opposite of being spiritual, basically. There is more to it, kind of politically. I don't want to get kind of too controversial or appear to wind people up by straying into too much of current affair in politics, but I can say that there is definitely a link between the transhumanist agenda and the transgender I don't know if I should call it agenda. Let's just say that the two movements are literally coming from a handful of the same individuals. The people driving the one are also driving the other. And that in itself should give us pause for thought. I mean, I'm not going to name them, but I might leave a link when I've uploaded this to some kind of articles which can explain it a little bit more and let people look into this for themselves. I don't want to trigger anybody or upset anybody, but in the interests of honesty and spiritual truth, we have to all look at things that might be difficult, especially for those of us who have been very liberal and leaving that aside for now, and just going back to the idea of being merged with a machine. I have had an astral experience of encountering a cyborg. It was very upsetting. I might have documented it in one of my dream diaries before. I'll try and quickly describe it now. Lucid dream state, what I would call unforced astral projection, not something I was deliberately doing consciously, but it became an astral experience. It began, as so many of these astral experiences do, being kind of launched into a scene that was in full flow, almost as if I'd just become conscious in a parallel universe or this alternate dimension. No build up to the scene, no background to how I was there, just in it in the moment. And what happened was I was about to go on stage with Hillary Clinton. Believe it or not, yep, Hillary Clinton. I've encountered in the astral state several famous, really, really, big public figures, politicians, and religious people, and royal people. Not trying to do it, by the way, apart from in one case, but and it always gives me a really fascinating insight into that person, which more often than not is a really different angle to how I see them, regardless of whether I like them or not. That's irrelevant. It's just very interesting how they appear in this state. Now, Hillary Clinton, we were about to go on stage, and I think often with this experience, I don't know if it's because I'm going into somehow joining psychic forces with somebody else and seeing through their eyes. Okay, I'm not discounting this possibility, because that would explain the encounters with these famous people who I don't know personally, some sort of psychic link up or wavelength connection. Okay, we were about to go on stage. She grabbed my hand, and I had the weird sense that she was taking me with her onto the stage because she wanted to somehow feed on me, like I was going to somehow enhance her popularity, which, that's, again, not me personally, but whoever's eyes I was seeing through. This was the case, and she grabbed my hand, and I remember feeling as if this person whose eyes I was looking through, I didn't like her. However, that my default position was that I didn't like her, but she had this super mega charm offensive that was kind of seeping through me. And as she was kind of holding my hand and we were walking onto the stage, I found myself, despite myself, warming to her and liking her. But, and it's quite an important part, she also seemed to be completely off her head. That is either some sort of clone, which I don't really believe in the idea of clones, by the way, this is just a way of describing it, or just medicated up to the eyeballs, and herself, Hillary Clinton, but not herself, okay? Great big beaming smile, mad, crazy smiling eyes, walked out onto the stage, huge crowd. Okay, and that was it for that scene. Now, in the next scene, she's taking me, we're somehow behind the scenes now, and she walks me to an area where I think it's daytime. It's also outside. Don't know where it is. I've no idea how we got there or where it is. But there are men in white coats, which I'm, some people, if you're listening, might think, bet there are, you're both the baronotters. But these were scientists. And she wanted to show me something. There are at least 2 scientists, one of them in particular, who engaged with me more than the others as this unfolded. I can picture him quite clearly, quite a small man, reddish, wiry, not really short cropped, but not long hair, middle-aged, wearing glasses. He had a moustache, quite small man with a white coat, but I wasn't paying that much attention to this man, even though I was introduced to him, because as Hillary and I stood watching, in front of us there were 2 vehicles. Now, they were military. I was aware they were military vehicles, parts one in front of the other, and they were dry ice was coming out of them. And what happened next is, out of one of these vans was carried the head of a man. It but carried by soldiers, but I wasn't really paying attention to the people carrying the, I don't want to say tray or what it was. It was on something flat, because I was staring at this head, which was disembodied, and he was conscious. Okay, this man's head was staring into my eyes, and I cannot describe how profoundly upsetting it was, the sight of this. This was absolutely, I burst into tears immediately upon seeing this. I was just crying as this man stared at me. Now, and what they were doing was they were removing it from one of the vehicles into another, and there was this sense of, whoa, we've got to do this really quickly, because it could only survive for so long, not attached to whatever it was, whatever machinery was. I couldn't see inside the vehicles, and there was a sense that this was an incredibly dangerous procedure, and I was just beside myself, horrified and crying, and he was staring into my eyes. Now, if this wasn't unusual enough, his head, okay, so it was big. It was really big. It was bigger than a human head. It didn't strike me that it was the head of a giant, but realistically, it was big. It was unusual in other ways, because his skin color was different to any regular human skin color I've seen before. It was very red, so like it wasn't the closest probably skin color I think that I can think of a normal human being would be maybe Native American Indian or Tibetan or Siberian, but redder. Okay, very smooth red and very black hair, shiny thick black hair, and blue eyes and a very fierce expression, and he was staring into my eyes. And as they were, and this is all happening very quickly, of course, I'm taking a long time to describe it, but this was seconds, all happening very quickly, and I was completely unprepared for it. Now, I was so upset that the scientist man that I mentioned being introduced to, he took me to sit down away from this at a bench and was talking to me. I guess you could say he was talking me down from the almost, hysteria, I suppose, that I was in, having seen this. I don't know what he was saying. He was talking to me and I was talking back, but I don't know what was being said. And the experience ended very shortly after that. Now, at the time I saw it, and afterwards when I was thinking about this lucid experience, I kind of thought that what I was witnessing was some sort of experiment where they've done it with dogs, haven't they? I think in Russia, where they were taking heads off and keeping them alive. I saw it as something like this, but quite a while later, when I described it to a friend, she said what came to her mind when I described it was a cyborg, which I hadn't thought of before, and I still don't know what I think about that idea, but so I'm just throwing it out there for anyone who hears this, whether they think it's just madness or just whatever, a folly, or they do think that this severed head had been kept alive in some sort of grotesque experiment, which I think probably is possible. If they've done it to a dog, then it wouldn't surprise me if they try and do it to a man. Maybe they were going to put that head onto a robotic body. Maybe they were making super soldiers. Maybe it was a cyborg. Maybe it was a robot. It was terrifying, I can tell you. Absolutely terrifying. And sad, really sad. And I just want to leave the transhumanism kind of thing that I've put out there with that.